to Overtime Hockey Talk's special edition of Offseason Reports as we dive into the New Jersey Devils, a team that missed the playoffs by quite a fair margin and never really was in danger of making the playoffs. And my co-host Justin Baker joins me. Justin, your thoughts on the New Jersey Devils season as a whole?
Yeah, I think this was more of a reality check for the fans, right? I remember just a couple of years ago they made the move to bring in PK Subban, and they did some offseason additions the following year, and everybody was just like, this team's on the up and up, they're coming back, and lo and behold, they finish at the bottom, select Jack Hughes, and then the rest is history. So here we are.
Well,
I think
and that was the year coming off of a surprise playoff appearance. Remember, that was Taylor Hall had his unreal year and all that. Like that was the expectations were low, and then they became really high, and now they're like, I feel like they're even lower than they were before.
Right. I think this is the New Jersey Devils we all expected to see, and here we are. No surprise at 29th in the league. So here we go.
I think the Devils are they're a cautionary tale of what happens when you're in a rebuild and things don't go the way that you expect the other way. Like, oh, we're actually good. And then you go and you try to continue to make your team maybe more of a playoff contender, not really quite a Stanley Cup contender, but somewhere in there thinking, well, hey, maybe we're good and we can build on this. And you attempt to be good. You acquire players that are just not what you need in a quote-unquote rebuild. And, yeah, you get stuck with guys like PK Subban, although I think in the end, ultimately, Subban will probably get moved. Even if they have to eat half his salary at $4.5 million, I think you've got a lot of teams knocking on the door to try and bring PK Subban in and see if they can make something of it.
Yeah, don't disagree at all. And I think this is a great example for the Ottawa Senators to look at, right? I mean, they're a team that kind of had a little bounce back season this year, right? You started to see them climb the ladders a little bit, so maybe they get a little cocky this offseason. So again, just cautionary tales, right? Just take it slow. Right?
Yep. And that's a great point, that those teams towards the end of the year this year, that even though, I mean, Ottawa obviously, like they weren't really in jeopardy of making the playoffs. Like they just weren't. It had to be a miracle little run for them to be able to do it. But they do look like they're going to be a threat next year. However, it's a lot easier to play when you don't really have any pressure on you. Like there was no risk of making the playoffs. So yeah, now look at Ottawa's only 8 points out of the playoffs instead of 22. Well, yeah, because there's nothing. You're just playing kind of for yourself and for each other, and you're just playing to grow, and lo and behold, you win some games. But then the following year, when all the pressure's back on, and you might make the playoffs, that's a totally different story. Totally different story. And the Devils, I think this year they did it the right way. I mean, I think you knew that they weren't going to be great, and that just was what it was, and they are going to get a pretty solid draft pick as a result. So, or draft picks because of where they're picking in this draft. So, the New Jersey Devils look like they are a team, though, that should be able to find their way into some kind of competitive market soon because of the players that are now coming of age. Like Jack Hughes looked a lot better this year than he did in previous years, in the previous year. Nico Hischier continues to grow as a two-way center. I like the acquisition of Andreas Janssen. He's a nice complementary piece. Pavel Zacha is kind of growing into himself as well. So there are some pieces there where you can see, okay, things are likely on the upturn for the Devils. Do you agree with that assessment, or do you think that there's something else going on?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think there's a lot of bright spots where you can look to the future and say these guys are going to be the future leaders of these teams. They're making the right strides, right? You mentioned some names there. Jack Hughes, obviously, Nico Hischier, but, on the back end, too, Ty Smith, right? What a rookie season for this guy.
Sure.
Coming out, he was,
23 points in 40 games. Pretty great.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. For a rookie defenseman, I was quite impressed. And then, of course, my biggest, tip of the cap sort of to the player, Mackenzie Blackwood, right? This guy signs a 3-year deal at $2.8 million, and it looks like New Jersey got themselves a frickin' bargain because this guy, on a terrible team, still manages to put up an above 900 save percentage. Boy, I bet you Philadelphia wish they had him right now. But, hey, your lock would have made the playoffs at that point because, the guy looked good and he bailed the Devils out a lot of nights.
Did you really you just went there and you just brought up the fact that I had Philadelphia as a lock to make the playoffs? That was just so incredibly subtle. I appreciated the subtleness of it. At least it wasn't all out just making me feel really dumb, but
well, you're just digging a hole right now.
I still felt it. I felt it.
Well, I apologize.
It's okay. All is forgiven. Now, obviously, the Devils, they made some good moves at the deadline, being able to ship Palmieri and Zajac both for that first rounder of the Islanders. They also have the Islanders' second round pick as well. When did they acquire that second round pick? Oh, for Andy Green last year. That was for Andy Green. Okay, so the Devils are basically going to be picking where the Islanders are. The Devils don't have their own second round pick as they traded that away for signing Nikita Gusev to the Vegas Golden Knights. So the Devils, some good picks. The Islanders, they're probably going to be in the bottom, like 25, 26, maybe even lower than that, depending on how they do here. We already know they're through the first round, so that pick isn't going to be tremendously high, but nevertheless, the Devils have done a good job at hitting in on late picks. You talked Ty Smith. I think he's like 17th. Yeah, he was 17th in 2018. The Devils have done a pretty good job at least having their first round picks become something. Like they appear somewhere on their team a lot of the times, and that's a good sign.
Yeah, and that's what you want, right? You obviously, if you're planning a rebuild, if you're trying to develop a team of youngsters, you obviously have to hit on these young picks because, again, a team like the Devils that is, far removed from a playoff contending team, they've got to stock the cupboards. And if you're not hitting on these picks, it's going to just only delay the rebuild. And, obviously with those first round picks, you have to hit on those.
Yeah. If you look, you go back to 2015, even 2013 to me, at least Miles Wood is still there. He was like a fourth round pick, but nevertheless, in really 2014, not a great year for the Devils and their draft picks. But you go 2015, they took Pavel Zacha for 6th overall, Mackenzie Blackwood 42nd overall, and then in 2016 they took Michael McLeod in the 12th overall, and they took Jesper Bratt at 162nd in the 6th round. So that's a nice little pick there. And then, of course, the following year they take Heischer at number 1. And the year after that, they take Ty Smith. And in the 5th round, Yegor Sharangovich, who's managed to play 54 games for them so far, and then Jack Hughes the following year. So they are at least every year hitting on someone who's coming in and playing for their team. Now, like 2019 and of course 2020 picks, most of those are, even 2018, most of those we don't know what they're going to become, but they have at least had a good pedigree in terms of what they've been drafting. So that's a good sign. But now it's a matter of the Devils being able to bring in something to surround these guys. Like I said, I like the Andreas Janssen pickup. PK Subban, I like the idea of the pickup when they did it, but he obviously is just a shell of who he once was. I think there is a small chance if Seattle really wants to get some splash, maybe Seattle goes and they scoop PK Subban because he doesn't have any kind of no move clause. So maybe PK Subban's the guy that they scoop 1 year at $9 million, and they think, hey, maybe we can kind of resurrect this guy for a year, and then we could re-sign him if he's any good. I mean, he wouldn't be a bad veteran defenseman to bring in on a team that is going to need a face. PK Subban wouldn't be a bad guy to do that.
Yeah, and if anything, if you're Seattle, right, you at least acquire capital in the sense that you get a guy to plug a hole for most of the season, and then you can offload him at the deadline and acquire more assets, right? Because as a right-handed defenseman, there's no shortage of teams that want a guy that also has a good offensive ability to his game.
That's true. I wonder if, I don't know, but I wonder if the Devils can keep half of his salary and have Seattle take him as the player that they take. Yeah,
you would have to basically frame it in the sense of a trade, much like Vegas did when they were getting draft picks. So,
yeah, my guess is you'd have to trade him, and then they'd have to do something there. But I doubt that a Seattle team would be super worried about coming up against the cap, because probably most of the players they're going to take aren't going to have either very lengthy big contracts or big contracts at all. And most of the guys with big contracts, teams are going to protect, or they're going to be forced into protecting them.
Exactly.
But we'll of course, when the time comes, we will do a fun little mock draft of what we think Seattle will do. But as we do some of these offseason reports, of course, it's going to come up because these teams are going to have to protect people. The Devils really not in a whole lot of danger of losing their really elite players, but they do have quite a few players who have at least played in a couple years in the league. So there are, outside of PK Subban, there's quite a few middling forwards on this team that could potentially be taken by Seattle as well. So, I mean, it's just something to keep in mind for New Jersey, but not a huge risk of losing anybody that's not replaceable. So, not really worried about that. I guess when you look at what the rest of this team brings to the table, I mean, I think you really look at the defense and you go, well, I just don't think that's an NHL defense for the most part. Like, it's just a very weak defense core. Is there a bigger hole on this team that you see?
To be quite honest, obviously we know this team could use some scoring. I mean, they finished the year 26th in goals for, but even worse, they finished in 28th in goals against, even with stellar goaltending from Mackenzie Blackwood. And then again, 31st as far as penalty kills go. So they were the worst shorthanded team in the league. So yeah, it's
not a good combination to win.
Yes, absolutely. And so when I totally agree with you when I think this team could really use some solid defensive defensemen back there and maybe a couple veteran guys, right? Obviously, Ryan Murray was a guy who, analytically looked much better than he was the last couple of years in Columbus. And so maybe they look to re-sign him. However, I think he's going to test the free agent market. And so what I think they maybe need more than anything else is, a middling pair, veteran defenseman, somebody who can mentor some of these younger guys like Ty Smith. And to me, I think a really good, answer. And again, it's whether or not you can pay these guys to come here, whether or not you can attract the free agents.
Well, they certainly have. They have the cap space. There's no doubt about that. I mean, they've got $37 million in cap space next year, and yes, they need to re-sign like a Nick Merkley, Michael McLeod. I mean, these guys aren't going to go for millions and millions. I mean, maybe they try to bring back Ryan Murray and give him a little bit of a raise. Connor Carrick. My guess is they pass on Connor Carrick. There's just not a whole lot that they need to do in terms of re-signing. So, I mean, the sky's the limit for how much this team can spend. I mean, they did have over $10 million in space this year alone. So $37 million. I mean, they have $60 million the following year. They don't really have much signed beyond Nico Hischier for the following year. So this team kind of an open slate.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. You could go out and overpay for a defenseman and get the guy you want, but it's whether or not they want to go there, I guess, is the big question, right? Obviously, when it comes to money, New Jersey's looking to the future because after this offseason next year, you've got to re-sign guys like Jack Hughes, Pavel Zacha, Jesper Bratt. Then you even got to look, a year after that to Mackenzie Blackwood. So you got to be wise with your money and not, if you're going to overpay for a guy, not sign him to a long-term deal, maybe 2 or 3 years. A couple names I guess you could probably look at would maybe be an Alec Martinez, a David Savard. I think those veteran defenseman type guys would fit very, very well in their top four.
Yeah, I mean, as far as free agent defenseman goes, there's not a whole lot out there that you're drooling over. I mean, it's maybe Alex Goligoski, not a bad defenseman to go after. Nicholas Hjalmarsson, like those are guys that you could see New Jersey going and signing one of them, maybe to a slightly inflated deal just to get them to come somewhere. But at the same time, New Jersey's got to look at their team and go, I mean, do we want to bring in a lot of money at the same, but then you also have to spend a certain amount of money. So,
right.
So they're going to have to pay some people, and New Jersey's not a bad place to play. People you're living by the ocean, so there's certainly people that would want to come. It's just going to be a matter of New Jersey finding the right guys, and I don't particularly like the way that this team is built at this point. And to me, I look at it and I think one more year of finishing at the bottom could be really helpful. Because I mean, what's their pick this year? I think, I mean, it's likely going to be top 8. Once everything's done, top 8 sounds close to me. But I guess they're third worst, eh?
Well, they are finished. I mean, they're technically 4th right now, but again,
fourth, yeah.
With the way the lottery
so they could be 7, but
yeah, you could fall a little bit. And so, but either way, you're still going to land a really good piece. And what would be really great for this team is if they can pick in the top 3, because there are some really, really good defensemen like Owen Powers coming in the draft that would just really bolster this blue line.
I mean, the nice thing is there's actually quite a few defensemen that are ranked very high in this draft. Like, this draft is the defenseman draft, so a good draft for New Jersey to be picking high in. I think that they'll go defense. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that they'll go defense unless somebody they love falls to them. But I would think that ultimately they take defense in this draft. It's what they need. I mean, they just don't have anyone that blows you away. I mean, Ty Smith, great addition. I mean, he's your first round pick. Hopefully he pans into something over the long term. And hopefully Jack Hughes continues to grow, and you just have to surround these guys with actual goal scorers. That's the trick.
Yeah, and I mean, they made some good moves, right? I mean, when they dumped off what's his face to Tampa, they ended up picking up Nolan Foote as part of that trade.
Yep.
And last year they picked high, I think at number 7, picked Alexander Holtz. So you got some young players that are coming in that can be potential goal scorers. But like you said, on defense, there's not much to be excited about as far as prospects go. So yeah, this is the draft to pick defense. And then the other thing you got to worry about for New Jersey is finding a backup goaltender, because they just haven't been able to find anybody these last couple of years. And I think they really could use somebody to come in. Obviously, they've got, they thought they brought in Corey Crawford and he was going to be the answer, but he ended up retiring. And so, one name that I actually was looking at and thinking this would be a really good spot for him to go and play mentor/backup to Mackenzie Blackwood, and that would be Freddie Anderson.
Ah, yeah, Freddie Anderson would be a nice little fit there.
Yeah, I think you could sign him to a 2-year deal to play out the rest of Mackenzie Blackwood's contract, and maybe you pay him a couple million bucks, $3-4 million, and I think he'd fit in quite well as a nice 1A 1B combo for this Devils team.
My guess is that Frederik Andersen could get a 4-year deal. I think he'd be looking for at least 3, but
I mean, let's face it, this is probably going to be his last chance to cash in, because I do see the wear and tear of so many shots against for so many years starting to take its toll, and I think a team's going to be very cautious if they're trying to sign him to a long-term deal. Yeah,
you're right. I mean, maybe he does sign the Robin Lehner style, like that 1-year deal that he signed in Chicago. Go somewhere where they have the cap space, where you can be used and kind of build yourself back up, and then shoot for a good payday for your quote unquote final deal. Once people go, oh, okay. I mean, maybe wore his time out in Toronto, which it's pretty clear that has happened. I think it was clear to all of us last offseason, and it was almost a little shocking that they didn't deal him, other than, I guess you like to have a couple of goaltenders. Probably a good thing that they didn't, because they used 3 goalies all through the year, so they needed him. But it seems as though maybe he has some left in the tank if he can just take some time off, get completely healthy. Of course, he's taking time off now. I mean, he might have a nice 2-month vacation just on the bench here. Let's hope
Very
so.
True.
Let's hope it lasts 2 months. That'd be great. Okay, so one deal that I think is possible. If you remember, that PK Subban deal was not long ago. That Subban was dealt from Nashville to New Jersey, same general managers in both spots. And there is another Nashville Predator that will get a lot of attention here, who's going to be a UFA the following year, but could sign an extension in July, on July 28th or whatever. That's Matthias Ekholm. And I could see these two teams locking up and making a trade, because Nashville, very, very deep at defense. I mean, Roman Josi, Ryan Ellis, Matthias Ekholm, and you've got Dante Fabro, and they always ease. It's like with ease they develop these all-star defensemen, and I can see Nashville dealing Matthias Ekholm, deal him to New Jersey, and as Nashville, I think, of course, they might win this. They might force a Game 7, and if they could win this series against Carolina, we'll never know until it happens. But nevertheless, I still, even if they somehow manage to beat Carolina, you can't look at this team and go, yeah, this is sustainable. This is going to be a team. Like, something needs to kind of be drastically done. And I think flipping Matthias Ekholm and maybe bringing in somebody on New Jersey who also could use a fresh start, or just somebody who can bring a different type of offense that Nashville lacks. I know that New Jersey isn't exactly world beaters when it comes from an offensive standpoint, but maybe a younger forward for Nashville. I mean, when you look at who they have up front, it's mostly a bunch of guys over 28, 29 years old. So perhaps you're willing to, see if you can deal for a draft pick and like a Michael McLeod, somebody who needs some developing at the center ice position that could benefit Nashville. I think that's a potential spot for Matthias Ekholm if the Devils can get an extension. Only if they can get an extension. I don't think that they would give up like a McLeod for a guy who's going to be there for just 1 year when they're kind of in a rebuild. But Matthias Ekholm would be a great, for the next probably another 3 years, he's going to be a really nice top 4 defenseman for you.
Yeah, and I think right now, like you talk about, Ekholm, his value is about as high as it's going to be, right? So if there's an opportunity to deal, then now's the time, right? And so, maybe Nashville looks to make that move, and, who knows what's going to pan out after the playoffs. And, maybe Ekholm says, hey, I want to go somewhere when my deal's done, because I want an opportunity to, have, a shot at a cup, because realistically, I'm with you. I don't think Nashville is anywhere close to being a cup contender. I think they can compete in the playoffs, but, again, I didn't even expect them to make the playoffs this year. So long term, I don't think maybe, he's looking at this team and thinking, hey, I'm gonna have a realistic shot at a cup. He could go to a team like Boston that maybe would be willing to add him. But, again, it's, I don't believe he has a no movement or no trade clause.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, so there's no control where he goes at this point. So, yeah, maybe he, doesn't want to sign an extension in New Jersey. But at the same time, maybe he looks at it and says, hey, they've got Jack Hughes, they've got Nico Hischier. They've got a lot of really young, good pieces here. So maybe if I wait it out and within 2 or 3 years, this team can compete maybe at a higher level than, Nashville as far as opportunity for a cup.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thought, because otherwise New Jersey could very well just stand pat and just have another year like this year, and I don't think that anyone would think that it was the wrong move. Like, as long as New Jersey does a little bit, They do the little like the Andreas Janssen, like, hey, he's going to still be good in 2 years when that deal is coming up. So even if they aren't playoff contenders during his entire deal, at the end of it they could flip it and they can get something else. So it's, my guess is they're more likely to just stay the course. But if they were going to do something, I mean, I think it's go out and bring in a defenseman who can be your number one defenseman. Like Matthias Ekholm, he never needed to be Nashville's number one defenseman, but I think that he could with the right pairing, he could be a good number one defenseman. Also, if you don't want to trade PK Subban or you don't want to get rid of him, they played together in Nashville. So maybe you bring in Ekholm and he ignites PK Subban again, and suddenly, even if you aren't able to get Ekholm signed to an extension, I mean, if you're not any good, then you just go and you trade PK Subban and Ekholm at the deadline, and you're going to get plenty for him as well. So maybe there's something in there for the Devils. But the Devils are never a team that doesn't try to at least make a splash somewhere. They've been in some big trades in the last few years, so we'll see if they continue that trend. Any final thoughts as to where the Devils go this offseason?
Yeah, so as far as team status is concerned, to me, they're a continue the rebuild team. I think they're about a good 3 to 4 years at least away from being a, playoff contender type team. And so, again, add the prospects, add the pieces, and maybe get a veteran guy or two in there to help these young guys grow, and just watch Mackenzie Blackwood steal the show.
Okay, yeah. I mean, they're not exactly in an easy division. I mean, every single team in that division is pretty good. Like, you're not looking at them going, I mean, maybe the only team in this division that the Metro, like the actual Metropolitan division, the only team that they might be better than Columbus. They might be better than Columbus.
I mean, yeah, realistically,
I'd say on paper they're at least similar. Like, New Jersey doesn't have the D-core that Columbus has, but they do have some special offensive players that Columbus doesn't have. So they're at least pretty even. It's just Columbus has always been very well coached, and we'll see who the new coach becomes for Columbus. But New Jersey, I mean, really, they're not better than the Rangers. They're not better than the Islanders. They're not better than the Penguins or the Flyers or the Capitals. So I don't see this team being any better next year. You almost need to wait and see if these other teams kind of take a tumble and take advantage of it, because New Jersey I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs in the next 3 years in this division. It's that tough of a division and that deep. It's
yeah, I'll give you that, because eventually I think you have to see a changing of the guard where we see those Pittsburghs and Washingtons sort of slowly slip out, maybe. But
yeah, that's what they said about the Red Wings for 8 years, and then they won another cup. And I mean, that's what everyone was saying about Pittsburgh 5 years ago, and then they won 2 cups in a row. So
sure,
it's hard to say.
Yeah, it is. And then we could just see, again, a Team Columbus, like we expected to make the playoffs or at least compete. They just totally tanked. So who knows? Maybe we see, Washington do the same next year. But, I won't disagree with you, though. I do think New Jersey, obviously, at the bottom of this division. And it might be wise, too, for them to just stay the course, sit at the bottom and collect prospects, and then they can just, really develop these guys right. And the next thing you know, they're division champ. So
when you said collect prospects, I just thought of like they were collecting hockey cards almost. That's where my brain went. All right, that is our New Jersey Devils off-season report. You can find more of those when you subscribe to the show. We've done a few teams before this, and our team up next, the Detroit Red Wings, so stay tuned for that. Find us on Twitter @OT Hockey Talk, and we will talk to you soon.